Hi there, I'm Patch, and you'll be reading with me today. Today we're going to be reading Night Shift by Stephen King. Did you know that Night Shift is actually a series of short stories? Is everybody ready? Great! Now, let's settle down, grab some cocoa, and let's begin. The phone rang a dozen times and he was about to hang up when a rough, sleep-blurred voice said, "Yeah? Mr. Osway? Barry Osway's been dead 6 years. I'm Gary Denkinger. Are you Chip Osway's stepfather? What'd he do? Pardon? He's run off. I want to know what he did. As far as I know, nothing. I just wanted to talk with him. Do you have any idea where he might be? Nah, I work nights. I don't know none of his friends. Any idea at... No, he took the old suitcase and $50 he saved up from stealing car parts or selling dope or whatever these kids do for money. Gone to San Francisco to be a hippie for all I know. If you hear from him, will you call me at school? Jim Norwin. English wing. Sure will. Jim put the phone down. The registration secretary looked up and offered a quick, meaningless smile. Jim didn't smile back. 2 days later, the words "left school" appeared after Chip Osway's name on the morning attendance slip. Jim began to wait for Simmons to show up with a new folder. A week later, he did. He looked dully down at the picture. No question about this one. The crew cut had been replaced by long hair, but it was still blonde, and the face was the same. Vincent Corey. Vinny to his friends and intimates. He stared up at Jim from the picture, an insolent grin on his lips. When he approached his Period 7 class, his heart was thudding gravely in his chest. Lawson and Garcia and Vinny Corey were standing by the bulletin board outside the door. They all straightened when he came toward them. Vinny smiled his insolent smile, but his eyes were as cold and dead as ice floes. You must be Mr. Norman. Hi, Norm. Lawson and Garcia tittered. I'm Mr. Norman, Jim said, ignoring the hand that Vinny had put out. You'll remember that. Sure, I'll remember it. How's your brother? Jim froze. He felt his bladder loosen, and as if from far away, from down a long corridor somewhere in his cranium, he heard a ghostly voice. Look, Vinny, he wet himself. What do you know about my brother? He asked thickly. Nothing, Vinny said. Nothing much. They smiled at him with their empty, dangerous smiles. The bell rang and they sauntered inside. Drugstore phone booth, 10 o'clock that night. Operator, I want to call the police station in Stratford, Connecticut. No, I don't know the number. Clicking on the lines. Conferences. The policeman had been Mr. Neville. In those days he had been white-haired, perhaps in his mid-50s. Hard to tell when you were just a kid. Their father was dead, and somehow Mr. Nell had known that. Call me Mr. Nell, boys. Jim and his brother met at lunchtime every day, and they went to the Stratford diner to eat their lunch bags. Mom had given them each a nickel to buy milk, and that was before milk programs in school had started. And sometimes Mr. Nell would come in, his leather belt creaking with the weight of his belly and his .38 revolver, and buy them each a pie a la mode. Where were you when they stabbed my brother, Mr. Nell? A connection was made. The phone rang once. Stratford Police. Hello, my name is James Norman, officer. I'm calling long distance. He named the city. I want to know if you can give me a line on a man who would have been on the force around 1957. Hold the line a moment, Mr. Norman. A pause, then a new voice. I'm Sergeant Morton Livingston, Mr. Norman. Who are you trying to locate? Well, Jim said, us kids just called him Mr. Nell. Does that? Hell yes! Don Nell's retired now. He's 73 or 4. Does he still live in Stratford? Yes, over on Barnum Avenue. Would you like the address? And the phone number, if you have it. Okay. Did you know Don? He used to buy my brother and me apple pie a la mode down at the Stratford Diner. Christ, that's been gone over 10 years. Wait a minute. He came back on the phone and read an address and a phone number. Jim jotted them down, thanked Livingston, and hung up. He dialed O again, gave the number, and waited. When the phone began to ring, a sudden hot tension filled him, and he leaned forward, turning instinctively away from the drugstore soda fountain, although there was no one there but a plump teen-age girl reading a magazine. The phone was picked up, and a rich masculine voice, sounding not at all old, said, "Hello?" That single word set off a dusty chain reaction of memories and emotions, as startling as the Pavlovian reaction that can be set off by hearing an old record on the radio. "Mr. Nell? Donald Nell?" "Yes." "My name is James Norman, Mr. Nell. Do you remember me by any chance?" "Yes," the voice responded immediately. "Pie a la mode. Your brother was killed. Knife. Shame. He was a lovely boy." Jim collapsed against one of the booth's glass walls. The tension's sudden departure left him as weak as a stuffed toy. He found himself on the verge of spilling everything, and he bit back the urge desperately. "Mr. Nell, those boys were never caught." "No," Nell said. "We did have suspects. As I recall, we had a lineup at a Bridgeport police station. Were those suspects identified to me by name?" "No. The procedure at a police show-up was to address the participants by number. What's your interest in this now, Mr. Norman?" Let me throw some names at you," Jim said. "I want to know if they ring a bell in connection with the case." "Son, I wouldn't." "You might," Jim said, beginning to feel a trifle desperate. "Robert Lawson, David Garcia, Vincent Corey. Do any of those—" "Corey," Mr. Nell said flatly. "I remember him. Vinny the Viper." "Yes, we had him up on that. His mother alibied him. I don't get anything from Robert Lawson. That could be anyone's name. But Garcia? That rings a bell. I'm not sure why. Hell, I'm old." He sounded disgusted. "Mr. Nell, is there any way you could check on those boys?" "Well, of course. They wouldn't be boys anymore." "Oh, yeah?" "Listen, Jimmy. Has one of those boys popped up and started harassing you?" "I don't know. Some strange things have been happening. Things connected with the stabbing of my brother." "What things?" "Mr. Nell, I can't tell you. You'd think I was crazy." His reply, quick, firm, interested. "Are you?" Jim paused. "No," he said. "Okay, I can check the names through Stratford R&I. Where can I get in touch?" Jim gave his home number. "You'd be most likely to catch me on Tuesday night." He was in almost every night, but on Tuesday evening Sally went to her pottery class. "What are you doing these days, Jimmy? Teaching school?" "Good. This might take a few days. I'm retired now." "You sound just the same." "Ah, but if you could see me," he chuckled. "Do you still like a good piece of pie a la mode, Jimmy?" "Sure," Jim said. It was a lie. He hated pie a la mode. "I'm glad to hear that. Well, if there's anything else, there's one more thing. Is there a Milford High in Stratford?" "Not that I know of." "That's what only thing name of Milford around here is Milford Cemetery out on the Ash Heights Road. And no one ever graduated from there." He chuckled dryly, and to Jim's ears it sounded like the sudden rattle of bones in a pit. "Thank you," he heard himself saying. "Goodbye." Mr. Nell was gone. The operator asked him to deposit 60 cents, and he put it in automatically. He turned and stared in a horrid squashed face plastered up against the glass, framed in two spread hands, the splayed fingers flattened white against the glass, as was the tip of the nose. It was Vinny, grinning at him. Jim screamed. Class again. Living with Lit was doing a composition, and most of them were bent sweatily over their papers, putting their thoughts grimly down on the page as if chopping wood. All but 3. Robert Lawson, sitting in Billy Stern's seat, David Garcia in Kathy Slavin's, and Vinnie Corey in Chip Osway's. They sat with their blank papers in front of them, watching him. A moment before the bell, Jim said softly, "I want to talk to you for a minute after class, Mr. Corey." "Sure, Norm." Lawson and Garcia tittered noisily, but the rest of the class did not. When the bell rang, they passed in their papers and fairly bolted through the door. Lawson and Garcia lingered, and Jim felt his belly tighten. "Is it going to be now?" And Lawson nodded at Vinny. "See you later." "Yeah." They left. Lawson closed the door, and from beyond the frosted glass, David Garcia suddenly yelled hoarsely, "Norm eats it!" Vinny looked at the door, then back at Jim. He smiled. He said, "I was wondering if you'd ever get down to it." "Really?" Jim said. "Scared you the other night on the phones booth, right, Dad?" "No one says that anymore, Vinny. It's not cool. Like cool's not cool. It's just that as Buddy Holly." "I talk the way I want," Vinny said. "Where's the other one? The guy with the funny red hair?" "Split, man." But under his studied unconcern, Jim sensed a wariness. "He's alive, isn't he? That's why he's not here. He's alive, and he's 32 or 3, the way you would be if H was always a drag. He's nothing." Vinny sat up behind his desk and put his hands down flat on the old graffiti. His eyes glittered. "Man, I remember you at that lineup. You looked ready to piss your little old corduroy pants. I seen you looking at me and Davy. I'd put the hex on you." "I suppose you did," Jim said. "You gave me 16 years of bad dreams. Wasn't that enough? Why now? Why me?" Vinny looked puzzled and then smiled again. "Because you're unfinished business, man. You gotta be cleaned up." "Where were you?" Jim asked. "Before." Vinny's lips thinned. "We ain't talking about that." "Dig?" "They dug you a hole, didn't they, Vinny? 6 feet deep. Right in the Milford Cemetery. 6 feet of—" "You shut up!" He was on his feet. The desk fell over in the aisle. "It's not gonna be easy," Jim said. "I'm not gonna make it easy for you." "We're gonna kill you, Dad. You'll find out about that hole. Get out of here. Maybe that little wifey of yours, too. You goddamn punk, if you touch her." He started forward blindly, feeling violated and terrified by the mention of Sally. Vinny grunted and started for the door. "Just be cool. Cool as a fool," he tittered. "If you touch my wife, I'll kill you." Vinny's grin widened. "Kill me? Man, I thought you knew. I'm already dead." He left. His footfalls echoed in the corridor for a long time. "What are you reading, hon?" Jim held the binding of the book, Raising Demons, out for her to read. Yuck! She turned back to the mirror to check her hair. "Will you take a taxi home?" he asked. "It's only 4 blocks. Besides, the walk is good for my figure." "Someone grabbed one of my girls over on Summer Street," he lied. "She thinks the object was rape." "Really? Who?" "Diane Snow," he said, making a name up at random. "She's a level-headed girl. Treat yourself to a taxi, okay?" "Okay," she said. She stopped at his chair, knelt, put her hands on his cheeks, and looked into his eyes. "What's the matter, Jim?" "Nothing." "Yes, something is. Nothing I can't handle. Is it something about your brother?" A draft of terror blew over him as if an inner door had been opened. "Why do you say that?" "You were moaning his name in your sleep last night. Wayne, Wayne, you were saying. Run, Wayne." "It's nothing." But it wasn't. They both knew it. He watched her go. Mr. Nell called at 8:15. "You don't have to worry about those guys," he said. "They're all dead." Is that so? He was holding his place and raising demons with his index finger as he talked. Car smash. 6 months after your brother was killed. A cop was chasing them. Frank Simon was the cop, as a matter of fact. He works out at Sikorsky now. Probably makes a lot more money. And they crashed. The car left the road at more than 100 miles an hour and hit a main power pole. When they finally got the power shut off and scraped them out, they looked cooked medium rare. Jim closed his eyes. You saw the report? Looking at it myself. Anything on the car was a hot rod. Any description? Black 1954 sedan with snake eyes written on the side. Fitting enough. They really crapped out. They had a sidekick, Mr. Nell. I don't know his name, but his nickname was Bleach. That would be Charlie Sponder, Mr. Nell said without hesitation. He bleached his hair with Clorox one time. I remember that. It went streaky white, and he tried to dye it back. The streaks went orange. Do you know what he's doing now? Career army man. Joined up in 58 or 9 after he got a local girl pregnant. Could I get in touch with him? His mother lives in Stratford. She'd know. Can you give me her address? I won't, Jimmy. Not until you tell me what's eating you. I can't, Mr. Nell. You'd think I was crazy. Try me. I can't. All right, son. Will you? But the 9 was dead. You bastard, Jim said and put the phone in the cradle. It rang under his hand and he jerked away from it as if it had suddenly burned him. He looked at it, breathing heavily. It rang 3 times, 4. He picked it up, listened, closed his eyes. A cop pulled him over on his way to the hospital, then went ahead of him, sirens screaming. There was a young doctor with a toothbrush mustache in the emergency room. He looked at Jim with dark, emotionless eyes. Excuse me, I'm James Norman, and... I'm sorry, Mr. Norman. She died at 9:04 p.m. He was going to faint. The world went far away and swimmy, and there was a bright, high buzzing in his ears. His eyes wandered without purpose, seeing green-tiled walls, a wheeled stretcher glittering under the overhead fluorescence, a nurse with her cap on crooked. Time to freshen up, honey. An elderly was leaning against the wall outside emergency room number 1, wearing dirty whites with a few drops of drying blood splattered across the front. Cleaning his fingernails with a knife, the orderly looked up and grinned into Jim's eyes. The orderly was David Garcia. Jim fainted.